that country. I think it's only for the people of Syria to decide their fate.
I think we all would agree on the fate and on peace and stability. You mentioned foreign powers supporting groups on the ground, and many would agree with you about rebels being supported by outside powers. But more than 400,000 people are dead in Syria, according to the UN. The vast majority of them killed by the Syrian government, not by quote-unquote terrorists. And that government has been armed, funded and militarily supported by Tehran from day one.
These are certain allegations. Of course, the government of Iran does not agree with many of them, but the important thing is that
you do give money to Assad and you do give weapons to Assad.
Terrorists are now intervening for several years now in the internal affairs of that country. And as I mentioned, it's for the people to decide their fate. It's for the foreign powers to assist them to come to an internal dialogue for peace and for a democratic process that would ensure a peaceful resolution of these conflicts.
But, Madam Vice President, the world has looked on in horror at some of the images coming out of East Aleppo. People barrel-bombed, children hit with chlorine gas. Bashar al-Assad may laugh away those images and say all of those kids are terrorists. But surely you are not going to say that today. Surely those images must bother you as a parent, as a human being, when you see those images of kids being bombed in East Aleppo.
Those images, those images, I see those images and they bother me. I see those images in Yemen and what is happening in Yemen, and there's a deafening silence in most mainstream media, including your media, about Yemen. Why do we have double standards? Similar issues are happening in parts of Palestine.
I think we've covered, on this show, we've covered Yemen and Palestine. Right now we're talking about Syria and Iran's role in Syria. If you want to criticize Saudi Arabia's role in Yemen, why not criticize your own government's role in Syria? Barrel bombs are dropping on people in East Aleppo. I've never heard an Iranian official criticize the use of barrel bombs in Aleppo. Will you do that today, Madam Vice President?
As I mentioned, we have to put double standards away.
We all agree on double standards. Will you condemn the use of barrel bombs in East Aleppo against children, not against terrorists, against children? You said those images bother you. Will you condemn those causes of those images?
The reality is that we have to condemn such acts when they happen anywhere. But unfortunately, what is happening now in Syria is that the terrorists are being supported. They are creating violence. They are aggravating.
Madam Vice President, the majority of people killed in Syria, according to every independent group, have been killed by the Assad government, which Iran arms, funds and supports.
This is your analysis.
That's the UN analysis.
Independent groups don't believe in this analysis. They believe that the intervention of terrorist groups is a major issue. So I think that we have to go back to the basics. The basics is that the people of Syria have to decide for their future. Foreign intervention, foreign terrorists, they have to be left out of the picture. The Syrian people have to get together, negotiations and dialogue for peace and stability in their country and in their region.
One final question on Syria before we move on. You've accused many outside powers of arming quote-unquote terrorist groups in Syria. Many Western governments would agree with you, many analysts would agree with you. But Iran supports Houthi fighters in Yemen, Hezbollah in Lebanon and in Syria. It sends foreign fighters from across the world, from as far afield as Afghanistan, Shia fighters, into Syria to prop up a government that represents a minority Alawite population. Many would say that you're interfering in Syria, you're sending in quote-unquote terrorists, you're contributing to sectarianism in that country, as much as any other foreign power, if not more so.
Yeah, these are allegations.
Does Iran not support Hezbollah?
The Islamic Republic of Iran, does support, particularly the spiritual support. Iran is emerging as a power which is promoting peace and stability in this region.
Not in Syria, where you're supporting groups on the ground who are committing, according to groups, war crimes, according to human rights groups.
That may be your
Not my version, Madam Vice President. Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, the United Nations.
Our version has been that we've been trying and working with different groups to promote peace and stability in Yemen, in Syria, in Palestine, in our neighbors in Iraq and Afghanistan. We've been working against terrorist groups, but terrorist groups have been funded by different foreign powers, and unfortunately there's been very little said about where this funding is coming from, where is Daesh being supported, both politically but also in terms of the funds, in terms of the arms. Where are all those arms coming?
It's a very good point you raise, and I've raised it with governments from across the region. I've got you here today in front of me. Just before we move on, just to clarify on Syria, does Iran support Hezbollah, a foreign fighting force in Syria? Hezbollah is a foreign force on the ground in Syria. Does Iran support that force?
As I mentioned, we support the expulsion of terrorists, of terrorist groups.
Is Hezbollah on the ground in Syria supported by Iran?
Of Syria,
very simple, Madam Vice President. Yes or no?
Only the people of Syria have the right to decide for their future and their destiny.